Hello, everybody. Thanks again for showing up for our webinar series on our MyDNA testing. MyDNA, we released it, I think, a couple months ago or so, and we've been really using this thing to personalize protocols for any of your patients. We have done part 1 and 2. This is part 3. We're going to be doing the panels. So each of these DNA test kits, when you take them, they're categorized into panels. And so today is another one that we're going to go through the general health and the hologenomics panel, which in your test, when you get your results back, you can click through the panels and look through each one. So we're going to go into this specifically so that you'll have a reference and a resource to be able to look through that and reference some of the stuff that we talk about today when you're working with your patients for making a protocol. In the chat, we're also going to have the sign up link so that you can sign up for part 4, which is going to be the next 2. They're going to be the hormone management and immune. That'll be the next one. And I know you guys know me. You've probably seen me before. You probably talked to me on the phone. Derek wasn't able to be here, and Shane had something that he had to do as well. So we have Madeline from our laboratory.
Hi.
Is here. She is a wizard when it comes to what she does in the lab. She actually works with Derek a lot for the genetic stuff that we do. In fact, you guys might have even talked to her because I know she does some of the genetic counseling. She knows what she's talking about. So it's really fun to have somebody here who's got that background. So we'll start it off today with, we've started doing actual slides for this now. We have our own slideshow that we created to go through this. But the first panel we're going to go through is the general health panel. And while I'm going through this, remember there is a Q&A box there as well as a chat box. Any questions that you have, throw them in the Q&A and we'll try to get to them today on the call here. But if we're not able to get to it, don't worry, because I've actually used some of the questions that you guys have sent in before to send you personalized emails. And one of the things that's cool about Systemic Formulas is that, even if you're not able to get your question on here, you can reach out to us through your representative or call customer service, and we can answer your questions. I'm one of the reps, and I'm within earshot to people like Madeline and Derek, a geneticist, and she works with a lot of people in the micro lab too. Yep. And so any questions that you guys have about the microbiome or any genetics or protocoling, nutrition, and you guys have probably talked to Jack Tips as well. He's our on-site clinician here. You probably see, if you're in the Facebook group, I recommend joining the Facebook group because Jack does his own video series in there where he does a lot of educational material about protocols and things that we can do dietetically, lifestyle to help. But let's get started today with the MyDNA. We'll talk about the general health and hologenomics. These are some of my favorite because they are very useful to somebody who per se had somebody who had already done the DNA test or they had already done a protocol. Like they're already done with the protocol. This panel here, this general health panel and the hologenomics is really cool for, I don't want to say biohacking, but it is really useful for monitoring each of the different organ systems. And you'll see when we go through that they're pretty much jumping through organ systems. The hologenomics is really cool because it's basically how we're utilizing genetics and your microbiome together. And so we'll start with the general health panel. Hopefully you guys can see that really well. So in the panel that you get, right? This is the first panel in the general health. Remember how I said before that it's going through organ systems?
Yeah, so this is the first trait that we have in our general health panel. And there's 2 types of this age-related macular degeneration. And the macula is that back center portion of your eye, and it can, when it's damaged or aging related diseases can impact it and can cause central vision loss. And you guys may have heard of the studies that came out, and they really focused on some critical genes like the ARMS2 gene. And that is a specialized protein that protects the eye. We're still looking into the exact mechanism behind that protein. And so there's a lot of money going into those resources to discover more about those things. And that second gene that you'll see there, that helps clear any debris that may accumulate in the extracellular matrix, which is kind of that fluid that exists between cells. And that's where a lot of waste can end up. And so we have a lot of cellular mechanics that help clear those things away. And that third gene that you'll see helps protect against the death of retinal cells. The retinal cells can't be regenerated, they can't regrow. So once they're gone, they're gone. So you need to help protect them to help maintain your vision as long as possible. And along with those, immune genes in general can contribute to inflammation. And with chronic or worsening inflammation, you can damage cells throughout the body, but in particular the eye. The eye is really sensitive to inflammation. And when this inflammation occurs, it can cause leakage, which is a critical component of this age-related macular degeneration. This leakage can cause irritation and scarring that can permanently damage your vision. So
it sounds like fun.
no.
I know what I see a lot when people do these panels is a lot of the recommendations of our products that they see a lot of times pops up as the immunogenic, which is the genetic product that regulates a lot of the immune system's genes, right? We actually, when Shane made the original formula, it says age-related macular degeneration, right? There was an ARD study that had come out that was basically on that, and she was actually about to mention that. But that product has all of the ingredients that were done in that government-funded study that was actually supporting and helping people regress the disease and make sure that their eyes are healthy. It's in those clinical doses in that product. And so, for the cost of one product, it's super efficient at looking at not only this it'll actually show up for a lot of the other ones that we're going to talk about as well that has to do with the eyes, because it's anything that has to do with like the immune system. It used to be called neurovision. And so it's really good for the brain. It's good for the eyes. And so you'll see that pop up a lot when we're doing the genetic testing. You'll see that product quite often.
So now we're going to talk about cataracts. And cataracts is a vision loss that's often age-related that is in a different part of the eye. The age-related macular degeneration occurs in the retina. This occurs in the lens. And the tissue that makes up the lens is a lot of like tightly packed fibers that they need to be maintained to avoid that cloudiness. And there's some of that same extracellular matrix that goes on with that. You don't want those fibers to be separated. That would allow anything to accumulate between those fibers, because that can contribute to clouding and obstruction of your vision. So that's what this first gene focuses on, is that cellular adhesion and keeping those fibers tightly connected so that there's no buildup of any debris. And then another gene that we focus on is the transportation of vitamin C that helps scavenge any type of damaging oxidative molecules that can lead to inflammation, and just avoiding that the damage that the oxygen, they're called reactive oxygen species, that they can rip away electrons from tissues, and it's pretty violent on a molecular level, but I don't want to go too much into that. So anyways.
So this cataracts panel too is like, you notice how she said extracellular matrix? I don't know if I'm supposed to be telling you this, but we have something in the works that would be a version of, you guys know about our collagen ECM, collagen product made specifically for extracellular matrices. And so I think in our DNA panel, it might actually recommend the new one. So you might see a different name for it, but we do have it available for these issues, as well as some of the other ones that we had already talked about. So just when you look through your recommender, keep in mind that some of the names are ones that are going to be, and then you can just ask me, or, we tried to name them so it'll make sense. So if you wanted to know, like what was it collagenic, I think, right?
Yeah.
Collagenic, which, when you guys are thinking about it, it's like, well, the name's pretty similar to collagen ECM, right? So you'll know which products of the systemic line, if we don't have an Elementum one ready yet, that you can use for that in the meantime. And some of the genes that you'll see, we're looking at the cataracts panel, right? But that gene, that vitamin C gene, is useful to almost every, I think it pops up in the lung one later, you'll see. Because vitamin C, a lot of your general vitamins and minerals that you have these genes for, where you have bad transportation, bad absorption, all those kind of things, they're going to affect all your organ systems. So it's definitely worth keeping in mind that, yes, even though you're working on the eyes in the cataract panel, like looking at your genes in there, it'll still help a whole plethora of other things that the patient might have conditions for.
Next, we're going to talk about longevity. And I know this is a big topic right now. We're all working on optimizing the genes and any nutritional or environmental components. I know there's a lot of concern about our food products and things that might be in them. And there are lots of things that can impact your body's longevity. And we might not be able to control our environmental factors as much as we'd like. So we have our products that are focused on these genes. And most critically is this first gene. As you can see, our image here shows how deeply integral that gene is into all of these regulation processes that occur that help maintain the health of your cells. And in maintaining the health of your cells, it prevents them from becoming dysregulated. It helps them to maintain the processes like protecting your heart health, protecting your lung health, protecting your brain health, because when those things start to deteriorate, then your quality of life decreases, and oftentimes your life can end. So,
and normally, like longevity, look at that. That's a lot of the downstream mechanisms, right? Like this is all cellular, which affects the tissues all over the body, right? So this is looking at the downstream stuff, and this is the part that I really get interested in. When you look at people like David Sinclair, and I can name drop him because he's a actual researcher, right? There's a lot of influencers that you guys are, seeing on Instagram that are really big into the anti-aging scene. And then you have everyone arguing about, don't eat phytic acid, don't eat oxalates. And then you have all the arguments between that stuff. But this we can all agree on is that downstream cellular genetics are extremely important for what we can do on the anti-aging spectrum. And so there's new ones coming in that I know you'll really like. Epigenin, there's all these newer ingredients that are coming out. Epigenin from chamomile and facetin, and some stuff that's now getting more public ears on, right? We're gonna have all these compounds, and when Shane puts them together, he does it in a way that is clinical. So it's not just single ingredient. We do have proprietary blending, but we put those proprietary blends in clinical dosing. Because proprietary blending sometimes gets a bad rap because you can pixie dust. But what we did is we made the proprietary blend, but we put them in those clinical doses so that even though we still want to keep that blend there, we want to make sure that people know that those are the clinical doses that we know in university research will cause something to happen, right? And especially for one of the ones that I'm most excited about that's going to be coming out, we'll be sending out mostly an email campaign probably to let you guys know that that's coming out. But those ones that he's working on, we still have other ones that will work with these genes when you get your result back. So don't worry, even though that anti-aging one isn't out yet, we do have other ones like the toxigenic, which works with a lot of these genes as well, that you'll see in the recommender will still be available to you. We still have plenty of resources for this.
So next, bone health, just in general. I'm sure you've heard lots. If somebody as they age, if they break a hip, it's oftentimes seen as a death sentence. It's not far off that often people end up passing away. And so maintaining bone health over time is really critical. And it's not just for quality of life, but for mobility and being able to get around, to be able to exercise so that you can maintain your other organ system health. And so some of the genes that we focused on in this trait is the vitamin D transporter, and that helps with the absorption of vitamin D. And vitamin D is critical for the absorption of calcium, which is critical for the health of your bones. So it's this big, long chain pathway that we start from the top and work at all of the separate pieces individually. And then we have other genes that are focused on, and those help with the building and the maintenance of your bones. Because over time, the cells that you have that build your bones slow down, and then the cells that reform and kind of break that bone tissue down as it ages, they keep on keeping on, and those other cells, as they slow down, you can lead to things like osteoporosis. So we focus on these genes that help maintain the function of those cells that build your bones and keep them strong and healthy as you age.
And the cool thing is we've also got protocols that Jack, Shane, we've made protocols before that we know work already, even without a DNA test. We know that these things work. A lot of the times when you look at these etiologies of what's happening, right? A lot of it is, people that are deficient in like vitamin K2, where they're like, well, I'm taking all my vitamins and minerals, or, your vitamin D is below, a certain threshold in your blood, and vitamin D regulates your transport proteins. So if you're eating minerals and your vitamin D is low, you're not going to have that much allowable active transport in your intestines to be able to pull up these minerals so that your body can even use them to rebuild bone. Another thing that we like about us being able to be very personal with you guys when we do these genetic councils, because Derek, Madeline, I think there's going to be more. I don't know off the top of my head who all does all the genetic counselings, but I know for sure they do, and they can give you lifestyle recommendations because, obviously nutrition is important in how we can manipulate these genes, but lifestyle, we have those things as well, because we know that bone mineral density, you look at these people that are doing really heavy weight-bearing exercise. Obviously, for somebody who's over the age of 60, 70, we're not going to sit there and give them a 400-pound squat, put all that weight on them, because even any kind of your body doesn't understand how much this dumbbell is. They only know the mechanism of force, right? Or like how much is being pushed on the muscle tissue. And however you do that doesn't really matter. But I know when we do our counseling with you guys, we can give you specific protocols like that, because as we do that, we'll know the patient's actual, do they have a broken leg, right? We're not going to tell you to do squats if they got a broken leg, right? So some cool stuff that they'll be able to give you on top of just the dietary recommendations. Obviously, this is just for bone health, but the same panels, all the other panels, we're still going to have your lifestyle recommendations as well that we can give you through those councils.
So another focus is kidney health, and kidneys act as a big filter, similar to the liver, but for different molecules. And they also help maintain your blood volume and your hydration. So a lot of your waste comes out, and they work to filter out the waste so that you can maintain the water and the hydration of your tissues. But they're really sensitive. And it's similar here. Once the tissues of the kidney start to break down, those things are really, really difficult to reverse. And so we focus on these genes that regulate those, what's the word I'm looking for? Molecular components of sorting through these waste products and maintaining your ion balances. And that's what that first gene is focusing on: calcium, potassium, sodium, and water. And because they're so sensitive, there's a lot of genes involved in protecting the DNA of those cells in the kidney. Without the DNA, those cells will just die and you won't have them anymore. And then as those cells die off, then the function of your kidney starts to decline, and that can lead to a lot of downstream issues, can impact other organ systems. And in addition to that, types of genes that you all, I'm sure, are familiar with, these methylation and folate genes, and these are critical for the kidney health to reduce oxidative stress, like we talked about before, protecting those cells from oxidative stress. And this is also helpful for any of your patients who may have chronic kidney diseases or diabetes. Diabetes is pretty well known for damaging kidneys and impacting those. So this would be really important for any of your patients who do have or are at risk for diabetic complications.
A lot of, especially some of the people that live in these locations where there's a lot of farming, right? A lot of runoff from farming, or people that live in, Florida, or one of the places that's really humid, over up by the Great Lakes, their kidneys and their liver, right, are basically working overtime because they're constantly bombarded with these things. And so a lot of my practitioners that are doing drainage, they do a lot of drainage pathway stuff to make sure that they can open all that up so they can detox all those things. Because if the liver ain't work, or the liver or the kidney can't support each other, right? It doesn't matter if the liver is going to, break down some of these toxins that the kidney needs to get rid of. If the kidney's not working correctly, it's just going to, keep circulating. So that's really one of the cool panels that we have that really helps with, not only, okay, you have kidney disease or you've been diabetic for so long and now you're starting to see the complications of that, but a lot of the stuff that can really hit home on the marketing side of, hey, I have this program, we're going to look at your genes, and pretty soon we're going to talk about the microbiome as well in the next panel. But when we utilize genetics and the microbiome together, this whole piece kind of, it's like a perfect marriage of what we can do for the kidney, the liver, the hepatic system, right? The lymphatic system in the brain, the kidneys in general. Shane, I'd say this is one of the things he knows a lot about. I've seen that work in people's practice. Like, it's pretty astronomical. I'm kind of, mind blown how well that lymphgenic has been working for people that are doing detox programs, even though they don't necessarily have a kidney disorder, but it's really helping people to eliminate things that we don't want in the body, right?
So kind of hand in hand here with the kidney health is our liver health trait. And again, it helps to filter out waste, but also plays other important roles like managing cholesterol levels. It also plays a role with energy maintenance because the liver is where the glycogen is stored. So the health of the liver is really important. And we have several genes that we focus on, and they help with the metabolism of certain intermediates. And that's kind of what our products are geared towards, to providing those intermediates so that none of those get backed up or you're not missing a piece of them. And so a lot of them can help prevent any of these issues that can happen, like cirrhosis, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, liver fibrosis, all these things. And again, since the liver is involved with cholesterol, these things can impact other health systems like cardiovascular health. And we'll talk about it a little later, but also with the microbiome, the bile acids are actually, they play a pretty critical role in the health of the microbiome. So making sure that your liver health is being well maintained is important for your microbiome so that you don't cause dysbiosis by having poor liver health.
Mm-hmm. What I've seen a lot with liver health, remember we were talking about detox before, and I'd say non fatty alcoholic liver, I've seen that a lot of, I know you guys are seeing that a lot. Like that's, especially in America, we're a little bit, I don't want to say overweight, but we tend to overconsume. And, normally when you go to the doctor and you lose all that weight, sometimes the fatty liver goes away. But if it doesn't in those key scenarios, then it's usually a pretty good idea to start looking at the microbiome and genetics. There's actually, I can give you a case study about that. A relative of mine has fatty liver disease or had fatty liver disease, and she was about 50 pounds overweight, and she lost a lot of weight. I think she lost about 40 pounds. And she did that without, the doctor wanted to get her on the, GLP-1 stuff that's really popular right now. And that's some of the things, call me up for that. I got a lot of cool stuff I can talk about microbiome and genetically about doing the GLP-1 and stimulating some of that stuff. So, but she lost all this weight and she went to the doctor, and the doctor started accusing her. He's like, you don't have fatty liver disease anymore. Because the first time she went in and she lost all that weight, she still had it. And there was really not much change at all. When she got her liver markers back, a lot of those enzymes were still bad too. And so he was like, okay, well, we might need to put you on drugs, come back and it was 3 months was when she came back. And in that 3 months time, she had worked with me and she had said, hey, I got the DNA test back that you told me to take. And I looked at the PEMT, which is actually the first one on this list, which is simply choline, right? And if you have a bad, I can't say bad, but a dirty PEMT gene, we'll call it, your body's not making the phospholipids while you're not consuming choline, right? Or it's just not making enough of it, right? And so I told her, just eat an egg yolk, over easy egg yolks. I know choline is, the phosphocholine is heat sensitive, I think. So you probably want to do it runny if you can, if you're big into it. But I think you'd still be fine with a, hard boiled egg or something like that.
Better than nothing.
But she did that I told her to try to do it every 6 hours or 2 eggs a day, 1 in the morning, try to keep that phosphocholine in high levels in the body throughout the day. And she went back and got her markers back and she doesn't have it anymore. And he was accusing her of going to a different doctor because somehow she doesn't have fatty liver disease anymore. So there's a lot of cool stuff. And that's just a genetic, side of it that we're looking at. And hers is an extreme situation. I wouldn't say that, most people aren't going to have that exact situation, but we can look at the microbiome, we can look at the genetics, and that's the human blueprint. That's who you are. Nobody else has the same microbiome or genes as you. So we can look into stuff like this to get you results that you need for your liver health using the Poor Liver Health panel to show you what's going on.
Next, we'll focus on lung health. And your lungs are, we don't think of it a lot, but they're exposed quite a bit to our environment, even though they're internal. Think about it. They are constantly being exposed to whatever is in the oxygen and the air. Could be anything. And we don't have any control over that hardly, except for certain lifestyle factors like smoking and vaping and stuff like that. But there's plenty of pollution out in the environment. And so it's really important to support the ability for your lungs to prevent the damage that can occur from that and recover from any exposure that it may have to come across. And so some of these genes that we focus on, like the SOD3 gene, the oxidative stress is a big component of pollution. And that SOD3 gene has mechanisms involved in it that help lungs recover from lung injury. So that may be an infection, that might be pollution exposure, really anything. But that is really critical for helping the lung to have this cellular mechanisms in place to help recover from those injuries, because as your lung function decreases, it can become a snowball effect really quickly. And so our next gene, it helps with the ability of the lungs to adapt to your environment. And so you'll see there we talk about helping your body adapt to hypoxia or low oxygen conditions. So that is involved in kind of elevation.
Kind of biohack, kind of, right?
Yeah, a little bit. And it's also really important for preventing inflammation. And those tissues in your lungs are really delicate. And the lining of the little pockets in your lungs that are actually doing that oxygen exchange are often only one cell thick. And so you don't want those to be damaged. You really want to do everything you can to prevent inflammation, support them, take care of them, because they take care of you. So, and that last one does a lot of that as well, but particularly with infections. And I don't know if any of you, I'm sure you have, had coughs that last forever and ever and ever. And so that's a lot of work on your lungs. And so that's kind of what we focus on, is this well-rounded approach of pollution, infection, and environmental factors that may occur to stress the lungs.
And I don't want to swear, but there's a thing called the C word that a lot of people have been talking about lately.
Yeah.
From years past. And this can give you a lot of ideas for what supplements to take that could support maybe someone that might have a long version of that, is how I'll phrase that. But, people like, we're out in Utah. And we live in a cesspool, because we have those mountains. And what's it called? Inversion.
Yep.
And
pollution collects.
It's awful here.
You can't even see the mountains, even though they're right by you.
And then, on top of that, sometimes we have the forest fires that happen over by us, and the smoke comes down too. Because even though, the air, you can see through it, even if you can't see smoke or anything like that, there's still a lot that I don't want to say I guess it is invisible, that you can see, like Vox and stuff are really big, especially indoors, right? You have, I think it's almost twice as much. And in places that aren't like us, who aren't, or who aren't as bad air quality, they're still inhaling like a full credit card worth of plastics.
Yeah.
I think it's per week or per day. I can't remember. I think it's per week, where there are just all these plastics. And we already know now, we're talking about genetics, right? We know that these things that we're breathing in affect your own genetics. In fact, some of the stuff that we had written on the white paper for the bindogenic actually goes through some of the genes that are actually down-regulated due to the toxins being in your body. And so if your lungs aren't able to handle a lot of these toxins, you're going to have downstream, I don't want to say genetic problems, but it kind of is a situation where now you're not able to detox as well due to the, impression of what these toxins are having on your body that you're breathing through your mouth. So it might be worth looking at air quality or looking at supplements and things that can support your lungs.
I actually have an anecdote. One of my friends, it was something I didn't even know could happen, but she was having reflux issues and she just developed this like horrible racking cough. And she ended up being admitted to the hospital. And it was because she was in her sleep aspirating the acid from the reflux. And so she ended up needing to have a lot of care. And our products is something that really helped her recover, like maintain those and regenerate some of those lung tissues that had been damaged from something I didn't even know could happen. And another critical part of your health, our oral health, which in recent years we've discovered doesn't just have to do with your mouth, but can impact lots of things, including your heart health. And so a big thing that you'll hear people talking about is periodontitis. And that's beyond just like gum inflammation. That's severe disease. It's a disease state of the mouth. And this is kind of where we start getting into some of the microbiome stuff. This is where the beginning of our gastrointestinal microbiome system kind of starts. And this area of the mouth is exposed to, this area of the gastrointestinal tract, is exposed to lots of different things. And the immune system plays a big role in helping to manage that exposure. And so that's where we do make a lot of focus on in this trait is the immune system and how it's involved with that, because there's a lot of interplay between the immune system and the microbiome as well, which we'll get into later in more detail. And here's where we see that vitamin C gene that we were talking about earlier. And this, again, helps to reduce the oxidative stress, but it actually helps to encourage gum cell growth and maintenance.
You can't even go on Instagram anymore without someone talking about the microbiome of someone's oral cavity. We look at a lot of, she was talking about the heart. I'd say the mouth is it's a front door, right, to get into the bloodstream, hence sublingual, right? There's a lot of stuff that we see with strep mutans and how we're fighting it, right? Normally it was always, hey, take an alcohol or some kind of a mouthwash, right? And then down the road, we're like, well, why are people's hearts, why is their heart suffering from this? And they find out later that when you destroy all the bacteria, including the good ones, there's a lot of bacteria that are nitrate degraders. And those ones you want, right? It's basically your saliva being able to do a lot of cool stuff with these nitrates that the bacteria can degrade and help with blood flow and things like that. So that's a very 10,000 foot view on that. But the oral microbiome that we're going to talk about later with our hologenome panel, it's extremely good to correlate with this oral health panel, because we can regulate a lot of the genes that are going to be, like she was saying, your immune system, which regulate the oral microbiome. And then we can directly use the holobiome panel to maybe say, okay, maybe you'll need this bacteria, or maybe you'll need something specifically we want to put into your oral microbiome that can change not only the immune system side of it, but the bugs that live there and help with remineralization and, a lot of cool stuff that they do.
So speaking of remineralization, we talk about spine health. And so there's a lot of components that go into spine health. So there's the bones, there's the discs, and lots of ligaments, and then of course the spinal cord, most importantly. And so again, like we talked about before with the bone health, we're focusing on the VDR gene, and that helps with the absorption of vitamin D again, which helps with the absorption of calcium to protect your bones, because bone degeneration can happen in any bone. And so protecting the density of your bones in your spine is really important. And then that next gene is actually really cool because it actually increases the expression of that gene as you age. And so if there are any mutations that occur in that gene that can impact that, the ability of that gene to increase in its expression as you age. And the reason why it does that is that over time, gravity takes effect and those spinal discs start to get smashed. And that's where we can lead to painful spinal issues that can really ruin people's lives. So very sadly. And so we want to make sure that we're identifying and supporting any mutations that may be occurring in genes like that. And then for the spinal cord, that third gene there, regulating synaptic activity and neuroplasticity, which those all play a role in processing sensory input. And oftentimes, most importantly with spine health, we're talking about pain. And that pain can lead to loss of function, and not just pain, but numbness and all sorts of other almost like phantom sensations that can be so disruptive that people just can't function. So we really try to focus on helping people support their bone health and their spine health so that they can, again, like we talked about in the bone health panel, the ability to be mobile is really critical for supporting all your other body systems.
Mm-hmm. A lot of this is your guys' wheelhouse, right? Chiropractic is, something you guys are really good at. And it's fun to see a lot of the research that was coming out of the International Space Station when they were doing the studies on people without gravity, right? They had the twin studies that I can't remember those two guys. Remember they were two bald guys, and one twin was here, and I think the other was up there. Maybe they're both up there. But they were doing research on like what's happening to bone mineral density and the spine and what's going on when you don't have any weight bearing or movement and stuff like that happening to the spine. So a lot of the research coming out of that was really cool because that's what you guys are doing with the spinal manipulation and, how much are they doing decompressions and, cars. I don't know if cars is gaining traction right now, but a lot of that seems to be helping. So our side of it is more of, so, hey, keep doing what you're doing. We're going to support you on the genetic and the microbiome side so that all the stuff that you do can help. And I know a lot of people use our products even just for holding chiropractic adjustments. Some of the topical stuff that we use will put on that area that they're manipulating, and it's turning out that it's helping them keep those chiropractic adjustments, which is kind of cool.
This is my favorite panel. So forgive me if I go on and on, but so the hologenomics, this panel covers how the genetics of your microbiome is influenced by the genetics of you and how your genetics influence the genetics of the microbiome. And there's a lot of interplay here, lots of layers. And that is because we have co-evolved with our microbiomes. And so this is a relationship that goes back hundreds of thousands of years. And this is important because this has evolved so closely over time. This is a very balanced system. And when it gets out of whack, it can cause a lot of problems. But there are things that we can do to help manage that. And we have a lot of products that are geared towards that. And this is important, not just for the gut, but there are a lot. We're learning more and more every day about how the gut is involved in every body system and how there are microbiomes, not just in the gut, but also in the lungs and in the mouth and on the skin and many other places. There's even a bladder microbiome, which is crazy. So this panel covers this interaction. And so we have a little bit more detail on the next slide.
And this one, so you noticed before we were going through all those organ systems, those were all in the genetic panel. This one is hologenomics. It has a lot in there that they'll go into the separate areas of the hologenome that we're looking at. So when you pull it up and you look through the genes and stuff, you can take the hologenome and go into a specific area of it, like the microbiome itself. That's one area that we want to look at, especially intestinal linings. There's a lot of those genes because your intestinal lining is, where they live. And so it affects them directly, right? Your genes that affect your gut lining affect the bugs. So this hologenome panel we're going to be talking more overarching about the panel than going through specific genes, because you guys can go through the specific genes with her or Derek or something, or any of the people that we have doing that. So keep that in mind.
So yeah, there's multiple layers to the hologenomics panel. So we'll kind of go through them bit by bit, but this gene expression and epigenetics. So the microbiome, as it's feeding on the things that we eat, those bacteria produce different metabolites, and that's why it's important to have the right type of bacteria in your gut, because the right ones are producing the right things for your body. And those metabolites can influence our gene activity, and those can communicate things like turning this gene on, turn this gene on more, turn this gene off. And there's even some studies coming out about how certain overgrowth of bacteria can influence your behavior because they feed on sugar, and they can tell you to eat more and more and more sugar, and they can make you crave it. So they can influence your behavior like little marionettes inside you. So it's really important to have the right concentrations and the right communities inside of you. And one of the other reasons why they're critical is what's called the metabolic partnership. And they have a lot of genes that we don't have. So there is lots of nutrients that we have no mechanism to digest them, and they do. So that's how we get a lot of these metabolites like butyrate, acetate, things like that, propionate. And those are really important for the health of the microbiome, but also lots of other downstream systems that need those to thrive. And so alternatively, we have genes that the bacteria lack, or other microbes. And in us having those genes, we also help protect them and keep them healthy. And so that's part of why we need to help protect our genomic health, so that we can help protect the bacteria that live inside of us.
And Shane always talks a lot about, so there's Papua New Guineans and humans, right? We don't have the ability to utilize cellulose.
Yes.
Right. But Papua New Guinea, I can't remember what the name of the tribe is, but they're able to literally use grass clippings because their bacteria that they have attracted to them and grown in their microbiome allows them to utilize that stuff as calories. And something that'll be closer to like us in these first world countries is we have the panel with the MCM gene for lactose gene to make lactase, the enzyme. And some humans, they're not really good at making it, but you'll notice when you look at your probiotics, you know, some of the stuff that you guys have seen that's most common in probiotics is the lactobacillus and the bifidos, right? And a lot of those species make lactase. And so you can, you know, if you don't have the gene,
that's okay.
We can look at your panel.
You get the bugs.
And we'll give you the bugs, and that'll save you.
Yeah, it helps cover those gaps that you may have. And that's really important, because when we're talking about some of those food sensitivities, it's not necessarily the best move to immediately remove that from your diet, because a lot of those things contain critical nutrients for you, but they're also critical in maintaining your microbiome. So if you cut those out, you're limiting your ability to have a healthy and robust and diverse microbiome. And a lot of the things that we eat are things that we're not getting calories for. They are for our microbiome, and that's invaluable. We can't overlook that. So while a lot of times we may recommend like a low FODMAP diet, and that's pretty restricted, but it's only meant to be used short term, where then you start reintroducing foods one at a time. And that can really help you identify true food intolerances. And then the other ones, you can even try to train yourself out of those food intolerances, because oftentimes those intolerances come about because you lack the microbes that break those down. And so by incorporating those things that you may be sensitive or intolerant to slowly over time and increasing them, you can help build those populations of bacteria or other microbes that you're lacking that are meant to be there. And so it's kind of counterintuitive, but not necessarily cutting out things that make you feel sick, but maybe just microdosing them at first and building over time.
There's specific examples of this that you see with a lot of the marketing that goes into niching yourself, right? Because a lot of big names, and I don't know if I should name any, they talk about avoiding lectins, avoid oxalates, avoid phytic acids and things that we consider antinutrients. But when we look at like oxalates, for instance, you obviously eating more oxalates than your microbiome can handle could have some effects. But on the other end, you have genes for that as well. So if you have low genes for that, right, you can make up for it with oxalobacter, which can utilize that compound. And some of the compounds, like the phytic acid, which we consider an antinutrient, gets turned into health compounds. And I think it's inositol and vitamin B6. Don't quote me on that, but I know that the bacteria can take that and turn it into these super healthy compounds that are utilized by you, the human, which is why we have this partnership, right? Because since I keep, phytic acid to me is bad, but the bacteria love it. And they'll give me all these cool compounds because of it, or when I feed them the things that they like.
Yeah. And another really important component of the microbiome is that it helps to communicate and train our immune system. And that is one of the first ways that our immune system is educated as infants, is with the development of our microbiome. And so that's a critical first step in our growth and development as human beings. And it kind of gets lost as we age and we're not eating the right things and not doing the right things to take care of it. And so you have to make sure that you're maintaining the correct levels of these microbes, because if you allow the good ones to die, a lot of these opportunistic pathogens can bloom, is the word that's used a lot of times, and they can overtake, and they're kind of like a weed, and they can be hard to get rid of. And if you let them get a foothold, there are things that can be done. And a lot of that involves lifestyle changes. And also we have a lot of products that are geared to that. We have superfoods, which are paired with our eubiomic products that offer probiotics. And our probiotics are specific to the product that they're targeting for.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those are developed in-house, and we have a lot of exclusive probiotics that have gone extinct from certain populations of people. So in replacing those, we can really help support the microbiome kind of have a comeback in our modern diet society.
Mm-hmm. The most common thing that we look at for the immune system when we're seeing the C-section babies, and what she was talking about, these exclusive species, they're called keystone species. They're purely anaerobic. And once they colonize you, they stay in you. And we're not knacking on other bacteria. Like, we're not knacking on anything that's like a lactobacillus or a bifido.
They're all important.
We still use all of them, but they're transient species. They go in, they do a cool thing. And, some do stay longer, because I know humans have evolved with fermentation products. So I know Shane was actually talking about this recently, about how like the bacteria have jumped to like the vaginal canal, and now they're keystone species there, or like something that stays there long term. But in the human microbiome and the intestinal lining, most of those transient species you're supposed to get in contact with. I think bacillus sticks around on average around 2 weeks. Some of the lactose and bifidos can stick around a lot longer. But those you want to always be in contact with eating fermented foods, or the bacillus species are the ones that you go out in nature and get. They're marketed as SBOs, or soil-based organisms. You hear a lot about those. But when you're looking at these keystone species, these are ones that are getting passed from human to human. And so you see a baby that's born that's C-section, they're not going through the vaginal canal and getting, it sounds kind of gross, but it's called imprinting, and they get it all in them, and they culture these keystone species. And this is why we look at the autoimmune conditions in C-section babies. I think, what is it, like 50, 60%? I can't remember. It's something ridiculously high.
Because their immune system hasn't been educated.
It hasn't been trained. It's keystone species I consider them like a lion in the animal kingdom, whereas your lactose and bifidos and your bacillus are more like a meerkat. Right? They're still useful to the animal kingdom, but they're nowhere near as important as these keystone species are, due to how much impact these keystone species have on physiology. Like, if you were missing a lactobacillus, it's like, oh, okay, you're not going to die. You put it back, you might feel better. But if you're missing something like Faecalibacterium prausnitzii, which is in the neuroeubiomic, odds are you're going to feel pretty bad. Because they have such a large impact. And the only other way to get these things is through fecal transplant. And Shane in the lab has found out how to do this in a way where we can take it in a pill.
Mhm.
So if you're doing a fecal transplant, right, you're going to get the good ones, but you're also going to get the bad ones. They had the documentary Hack Your Gut, which had one of Shane's favorite laboratories, the Sonnenberg lab. It's a guy and his wife that do twin studies on the microbiome, and they were seeing, when they gave this girl had, I think she had depression and her husband had acne, and so she was taking her husband's fecal matter to do the fecal transplant, and she got rid of all her, like, she felt way better, like her depression went away, but then she started getting acne. And so the way we do it is we try to take as many keystone species as we can make that are, passed for safety and all that stuff that are getting researched. Like, you guys have heard of acromazine mucinophile. That's being made here too. That's one of the only ones that I've really seen through companies that's actually available right now. But we have, I think he's got like 40 to 50 that are ready to go, but we only have 20 in products because their safety studies are already done for them. We know they're amazing and they're being done in research.
We've got a lot coming down the line.
You have these available to you as a pill that you can take, and our probiotic colonizes you forever. So you get those benefits of that probiotic long term, unless you had another extinction event. And usually that would be like taking 5 rounds of antibiotics or something that really made you go
really sick,
leave everything, right? So that's one of the things that I always like to tell people when we're talking about our probiotics is that these are not the same as
not a grocery store. Yeah. And they're not the same as others that you can get. They're not, but they're better. So we're kind of talking about it, that coevolution that occurs. And, these microbes are here. They protect us and we protect them. And that's why this relationship is developed over time. And another cool thing, when you're taking transient probiotics, meaning that they're not necessarily going to colonize, microbes do this thing called gene sharing, where they can literally trade genes. They're just like, here, have some of my DNA, and now you can do this cool thing that I can do. And so as these probiotics are passing through, that can occur. And so those genes and critical abilities can be passed on by the probiotics that you're taking onto some of the good bacteria that you may already have. And so we can help kind of propagate those abilities within the microbiome without necessarily having to have some of those less critical meerkat species colonizing you. So really cool. My favorite thing to talk about. Could talk about it forever.
I always like to give people an example of how hologenomics works, because we as humans, we're holobients. That's like the term for it. And when you look outside at that tree out there, right, that it's supposed to be utilizing the soil and sunlight to do all this cool stuff, but that soil is almost unavailable to that tree unless the bacteria are manipulating the soil so that the plant can actually absorb it. We're kind of the same way, because the tree is eating technically the dirt, right? Whereas we're eating foods, and not everything that we put down our throat can actually be used. But you always see people saying, eat more fiber, right? Because we know that all these bacteria like the fiber. When you eat that fiber, if you have hundreds of bacteria in here, they're going to turn into 100 different compounds that are really good for you. One example would be elagitannins. What is the bacteria? Shane was talking to me recently. Urolithin bacteria. So they'll take the elagitannin and they'll turn it into urolithin A, which is one of those cool supplements that you're finding on the market right now for anti-aging. So if you eat a pomegranate, that bacteria, not only are you going to get the elagitannins that are giving you all these health benefits, right? Some of the cyanidins and healthy compounds from pomegranate, but those bacteria are then going to turn it into a bunch of other cool things that are really good for you. And that's how that holobiency and how we have lived together for the longest time. Our genetic panel basically wants to optimize that for you. So you take the DNA test and it says, here's all your genes. This might be interrupting something that could be regulating your microbiome. That DNA panel says, hey, do this about that so we can correct your holobiency so that we can make sure that all your organ systems are working correctly. Because we've only talked about kind of a 10,000 foot view about how these bacteria are working with us. But we know, and I can even send you guys documents if you guys request this, because I have them. I probably should have put them on here. I didn't think of it. But we know that the microbiome has all these, they call them organ axes. And I have the papers that I can send you that show how each of these organ axes are working, right? Remember before I was talking about glucagon-like peptide, you could technically see that one as like a pancreas axis, the gut pancreas axis, because we can utilize something to make your body make GLP-1 through the L cell. You have the gut brain axis, the gut thyroid, gut skin axis, gut adipose. There's all these different Yeah, it's on and on. And this hologenome panel will help you know genetically what we can do to correct those organ axes, as well as giving recommendations on, when you're looking through your panel, which of our pre and probiotics that you'd want to utilize to correct that person's health, which is kind of cool to have such a very targeted, pinpointed approach on exactly what's going wrong with somebody, right? It's just something new and novel that we're doing that we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen anybody put out there, hey, we're doing the hollow biome approach. It's relatively new, so it really niches you guys into something that you guys can promote that is just untapped right now, that you guys could really push in your marketing to get people in the door through this hollow biancy.
Perfect.
That's awesome. So that was the two panels, the hologenome panel, and all those organ panels. Keep in mind too, we made a new product called Organgenic. And so you guys have already been tapped into the biofunctions, the biocommand, some of the old systemic formulas products. We tried to take one product and add higher doses. I think the doses are almost like quadrupled for the organ tissues. Or the DNA and RNA tissue factors is what they've called it. And so if you're looking into that genetic panel and you want to support all those different organ systems, we do have the Organgenic too, that you can just pop, that has almost all of those in there. Because I think it's pancreas, spleen, heart, so on and so forth. There's all of those. All the DNA and RNA tissue factors are in there. But thanks for coming to this one. We're going to get to the questions here. I don't know how much time we have. But before we get to the questions, I want to let you guys know that this will be on YouTube. We're going to put it on YouTube for the replay. And that's where it's cool to check into our social media, because we have Instagram. It's popping off right now. We got a lot of stuff that we're posting daily. Shane does a lot of live webinars on there, or what's it called, Instagram Live, where he'll talk about something cool. I know last time he just talked about a paper that was just published that I can't remember. I remember it was really slick, whatever it was.
He was really good. Go watch it.
Trust me. And the Elementum Labs, I put on the slide so you guys can see it really quick before I pull it down. That's our YouTube page. So I'm sorry, it gets kind of confusing because we have the systemic formulas and Elementum, and it's become one company. But if you look on the right too, we do have that private group there. So anybody who is already with us, who has an account with us, that's a place where you can go on to the Facebook page and commingle with some of your colleagues. A lot of people like to get together and work on marketing or work on protocols that they've been making. Jack Tips is in there. He does a lot of videos and can answer your questions for protocols. I check it as well. Your reps are going to be in there. I like to check things. So it's kind of like a hub that we all get together in and work on building your guys' practice. So make sure to try to follow all those if you can. And if you're not in our email list, or you're not subscribed, or you're not getting emails, make sure to shoot your rep an email or call customer service. It doesn't really matter how you want to do it, but if you email orders@systemic, or just let us know that you're not getting our emails, because we're not really spammy. We more so send you stuff that's based upon, hey, we have a deal going on, and I know some companies send me like 3 a day, whereas we're more like, hey, we have a deal that's going to be happening from period A to B. Here's the thing, and then we have the ongoing. So what's going on? We're going to have a webinar. Here's the link to that. So send us your requests if you want us to throw you in that email. And pretty soon we're going to start doing SMS texting. And so if you want a quick and easy way to know, this is in stock, or this new product just came out, we can text you that too if you opt into that. And so if you're in our email list, we can send you that. So just let us know if you're not in that email list. But let me pull this down and see. I'm going to check we got another one that says, can you explain the hologenomic test? Is it better than a hair testing, or maybe just different? And is it necessary to do one over the other? So I get a lot of clients that utilize hair testing, and it depends on what type of hair testing you're doing. Because when it comes to hair testing, I know mineral analysis and some of the heavy metal stuff is really useful. But I myself have done, and this is all, you could argue the technology behind it. I've done a hair analysis test, and I know that there's multiple people that have done double analysis tests and sent them in, and they would get totally different results, because I think they do it by some kind of resonance It's not too much of, it's not like an overly scientific approach. And maybe it's just ahead of its time. You know, we don't really know. But when it comes to the results that we're getting, when I got my 2 hair analysis tests, they were telling me about my allergens, and I wanted to test it. So I sent in 2, and my results were totally different. But when it comes to the hologenome is so new that most companies don't even have that as part of their readout. So even if they could give you information on the hologenome, they wouldn't know what to give you. So hair analysis for the hologenome might be kind of a secondary idea to use in your practice when you're trying to manipulate the microbiome. Outside of like the downstream stuff, right? So if it is working and it is like a really good test that is giving you your food allergies, right, then you can look at those and say, hey, reduce these for now, and then you can slowly introduce them and utilize the holobiome to overcome some of those sensitivities and whatnot, like even lactose, for instance, or lactose, right? If you see the sensitivity on the hair analysis test, you could go ahead and start slowly integrating lactose into the body to grow those bacteria so that they can thrive on the lactose from the milk. What do you recommend for the rotation of the biome products like Neuro, Terra, et cetera, et cetera? This is actually a good question because I got this today talking to a client who we were educating because we're working on making the education, right? It's a complicated thing because we're a company that's using very scientific approaches, and the microbiome and genetics are very dynamic. There's a lot going on with it. So it takes a while to teach people these things. But when we're looking at which ones to use and when, we try to utilize, if they had a general, let's say someone came in you and they were focusing on detox or more of like the biohacking side, we would generally recommend just using our roadmap, which Shane is actually going to finish up pretty soon here. And I'm really excited about that because we'll send you emails and, keep you up to date on that. But some of you I've already taught the roadmap, but the roadmap is the system where whenever I have a practitioner who wants to utilize the holobiome approach, it always starts with a recolonization step. And so the first step is always to purge somebody. And the second step is to recolonize them with these new bacteria. The bacteria you choose is really dependent upon what their disease concerns are. But like I was saying before, if they were coming in for detox or something more generalized or they wanted to biohack, you would start with the immune first, and then you would move into the other ones to get yourself colonized with all these keystone species, because the immune one is really good at solidifying a microbiome. Because remember before we were just talking about in that panel how the immune system regulates the holobiome. And so if we can correct the gut immune axis first, that's a really good way to solidify a good and healthy microbiome so that we can continue to keep giving you these and cycle these keystone species so that you can take them on. The reason we do the purging is because these keystone species, remember I said before they're anaerobic, they have a harder time taking hold in a microbiome than, let's say, a pathogenic species or a bacillus species, for instance. They have no problem. They can spore up and hide away if they don't like an environment, whereas these species are really hard to keep alive. And so we make sure to clear out your microbiome to make it a healthy microbiome with a healthy cell wall or healthy gut linings and things like that first, so that the next month when we recolonize you, these bacteria can take hold and recolonize you. So the answer would be for general people with no definite comorbidities, you would start with the immune after you're purging. For somebody who had like a depression or something, you would use the neuro, right? And you can take your time with it too. And because you don't have to rush it, you could do the immune, like I was just saying, purge, immune. And when I'm talking purge and immune, the immune is actually a full-on protocol, which contains the genetic products in there too. But the immune eubiomic, the immune superfood, the immune genic, right? You could use the mucosa genic and the methylgenic. That would be a good protocol to use month 2 after you're done purging, because our whole idea is to add genetic, add microbiome, put them together, and you have this perfect mesh of a protocol. Every month, you would change that based upon what their concern was. So clear them out, immune. And for someone with depression, you could use the neuro kit, which would be neuroeubiomic, neuro superfood, neurogenic, calmgenic, methylgenic. It'd be a really good combination for somebody because you can take your time and do it like that, or you can do it really fast with just month 1 purge, month 2 right into their health concern. Eventually, we'll have one out called metabo, eubiomic, metabo, right? You could go right into that after the purge. So that's how you cycle them. And the cool thing about them is once you're done purging, you don't necessarily have to purge again unless they had something happen. Like, let's say they took antibiotics, let's say they got really sick and got C. diff when they're in the hospital. That might be a situation where you might want to purge again. But if they like came off of an antibiotic, you wouldn't really need to purge. You could go right into the pre and probiotics and the genetic products. So it can get really nuanced, but eventually you can cycle through every single one of these pre and probiotics because, like I said before, as you're taking these new probiotics, each one has scattered throughout the formula keystone species. And so you'll get 4 or 5 from one, and then you take the next one, you'll get 4 or 5 keystone species. Eventually, Derek, who's not here right now, is working on creating the poop test, which is going to allow us to single out, okay, you don't have that species, you're going to want the neuro. Mm-hmm. Like we were talking about Faecalibacterium prausnitzii before.
Yep.
You didn't have it in your poop test. We'd say, oh, well, we know which one you need the neuro, right? So we can get it really personalized, but you can, like I said, start with a purge and then start cycling through these pre and probiotic systems so that they can get colonized with all these keystone species. And it's absolutely astronomical how the benefits that you feel from this stuff, especially after the neuro.
Yeah.
Right. People feel really good.
Can even help with sleep.
Oh.
Got an anecdote about that.
Oh yeah.
Somebody who really had issues with sleep and they took the neuro probiotics and it really helped them be able to sleep better at night without the sleep aids they'd been using previously.
And so there's a lot of cool stuff that you'll see pop out in research. I always tell people about leaky gut, how leaky gut was made fun of for the longest time. And when I was in college, I was working at a GNC. It was a GNC, I can't remember. I've worked for so many of these supplement companies before I, did all that. But I remember this gastroenterologist came in and he was talking about like colonoscopies and whatnot, because he was buying all this collagen at the time. It was like 2009. Nobody was really buying collagen back then because they were like, that's not a good muscle building protein. It's only got glycine and proline, right? The amino acid profile is pretty bad for muscle building. So people weren't buying it, right? And he was buying a ton of this stuff. And I was like, why are you buying this stuff? And he was like, well, I'm noticing in all my patients, when I give them collagen products, it's really good for healing gut linings, basically, to speed things up. But he was telling me how leaky gut, when everyone was making fun of that, we see it now as an actual problem in Western medicine, but they changed the name because I'm assuming they just didn't want to get flack for it, to be like, hey, leaky gut, it's actually a thing now. But they changed the name of it to intestinal permeability so they didn't look bad, right? So that's a thing now. And if you have intestinal permeability, that's something that the DNA test is amazing for, because we literally look at your intestinal lining genes, like your goblet cell genes for making mucin and
adherins.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of cool stuff that we look into your genes for that are like, hey, we can fix up your intestinal lining really quick by looking at your genes. And then we have the probiotics and the prebiotics, which we know make these compounds that help heal gut linings, like butyrate and all those cool compounds. So keep that in mind whenever you're doing the DNA test, that it will have recommendations for a lot of products that, necessarily in your head, you're thinking genetics when you're taking the test, but we do have the probiotics that are really good for recommending for these considerations. And so I see over here. Oh, where am I? I gotta go to the top over there. Oh, how long does it take? So normally I'd say the first month can sometimes be a little uncomfortable. Anytime you're changing the microbiome, it can get a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. And if you're having issues with, or any of your patients having issues taking the superfoods, again, that doesn't mean that they're bad. It means that they're lacking the microbes that break those things down. So sometimes that can lead to a little bit of bloating or gas. And so that's where you just reduce the dose that you're giving them. You do the micro dosing at first and you can build it up over time. So even though there's a scoop in there, like a pre-measured scoop, they don't necessarily have to start out taking that whole scoop. They can take a quarter of it, an eighth of it, whatever volume they can get down without causing discomfort is great. And then they can increase that over time. And that will help build up those populations of microbes that they're lacking, and they'll feel better.
We also have a kit We haven't released it yet, but we have the products for it. And so I can send you what it is. But it's basically something that you do a month before you do a purge, which has to do with genetically opening up all of your drainage pathways. Because when you're changing a microbiome and you have, let's say, LPS spill out or a lot of stuff that just your body has reactions to, right? That's where the uncomfortability is coming from, is your body having that immune reaction to some of the stuff that spills out that we, when you were doing, it's called die-off. Like you guys have, a lot of you guys have already dealt with this kind of stuff, or Herxheim could be the word that you guys hear. But we have a version, or not a version, a protocol that we do month one before we even purge. That's actually in the roadmap where we do prep, which is the genetically opening up all your drainage pathways so that when you do purge, you don't have as many reactions to it. It's very efficient at doing that. In fact, it outperforms a lot of the products that we were using for drainage because we have like ACX and things like that. I can't say replace it because we're still making both, but Detoxigenic is a huge upgrade on that you can use if you have reactions to this purging phase or detox in general, right? So you do prep, you do purge, you recolonize, and then you start cycling through the different kits of the brain kit. And then you go through right, so on and so forth with the pre and probiotics. So, and as of right now, I know we got to cut it off. We don't have much time. We're actually over by 20 minutes, I think. So we're going to call it. But all of the questions that you guys had in the chat, all the questions that you guys had in this Q&A right here, we will get to those because our marketing director actually keeps all those, and he keeps them on a file that we can look at and say, okay, let's answer these. And we'll be able to send you out personalized emails of the question that you had. And so, like I said before, we had the link in there for the next one that's happening. It's on 12/5. So next month on the 5th, and it'll be on the next two panels, which is the hormone management and the immune panel in the genetic test. And like I said before, follow us on the YouTube and social media. I'm on there. If you want to, talk to me, show up, I'll hang out with you. And then something that we're doing because it is close to that time, everyone loves this, Black Friday sale. So that actually starts tomorrow. It's 5% off on one order. And that's all the way through 11/27. And so if you're going to order online, make sure to use the code. The code is actually Early Black Friday 24. Just remember Early Black Friday 24, and you'll be able to get your 5% on order for Black Friday off of wholesale pricing. So it's nice to talk to you guys again. You might see her again.
Maybe.
So, if you want to tune in next time to see what we got going on, just show up and we'll hang out with you. But we'll keep in touch. Call the line, ask for Matt, see, ask any questions you need. But we'll see you on the next one. Okay, guys?
Thanks for listening.
Nice talking to you guys.